So as soon as I have the record going, we are live. So I'd like to officially welcome you all to our second episode of Stories from the Path. And I'd like to thank all of you in our Zoom audience tonight for joining us. And I'd especially like to thank Rebecca for giving her time in preparation for this interview and for being here tonight on a very busy travel weekend and after a 2-hour webinar of her own this afternoon. During the call tonight, Rebecca's going to share with us more about that journey. And we'll hear stories along the way. In a minute, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got started on considering this broadcast once a month. Before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the format for tonight's call. So tonight's call is designed to be a 60-minute or so interview. And during that process, we'll hear mostly just from Rebecca and I. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A as time allows and as the interest exists. That'll go for 10 minutes or so, and we'll get to that then. It'll pretty easy. We don't even have to use the raise hand function since I can see everybody's faces. I'll just ask you to wave at me. We do end this call at 8:15 hard, so if we're winding down with additional questions at that point, and there's anybody that doesn't have a chance to ask a question, Rebecca and I are both available to you through Facebook and through email with any questions that you might have after the call. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got started on this path and why this show came to fruition. So it all started shortly before my first IP session, or my first visit to train the trainer. So in April of 2014, I lost one of my key spiritual teachers and one of my best friends in a man named Richard Harsh. And I speak about him and I write about him very often. And Richard was sort of the person that urged me into this chapter in my life. But his loss was too much for me to bear. So that summer of 2014 was really a very bad downward spiral for me. And my lovely wife, Christiana, made the suggestion that I attend the Infinite Possibilities Train the Trainer conference in Chicago in August of that year. And that's when things started going for me. And I remember the first night that I walked in to that seminar and I heard Mike and Andy and Regina share their stories, and I felt their energy, and I thought to myself, I want to do that. I want to talk to people, and I want to inspire people by holding conversations and hearing stories. And then, of course, what happens is what happens with many of us along the way is the limiting beliefs kick in. And I told myself right away that I wasn't good enough to do any of that. I had no idea how I'd ever get started. Where would I find the possibility of overcoming my fear? But to my great good fortune, I was about to spend 4 days at an empowerment conference with a lot of the faces that I'm looking at right now. And I took away a lot from that conference, but I took away some very specific things. And one of the most important things I took away was the taking action breeds clarity piece, and that it didn't really matter what kind of action you took, that just the act of taking action put you in the current of life and allowed for the opportunity for change to occur. And there were some specific seeds that grew from that weekend too. I listened very specifically to Mike's seed that he planted about joining Toastmasters. And I've been a very active member of a Toastmasters club in Lincoln Park, Illinois, that has over 75 members. I've done at least 20 speeches in the last year and a half. And I've had great mentors that have really refined my ability to present in general. I listened to a specific seed that Andy planted with me about storytelling. And Andy, being a master storyteller, really inspired me to get some schooling in that area. So I took storytelling classes, and I met a man named Scott Whitehair in Chicago who runs a number of story shows, and he encouraged me and actually helped me start our own show. And we've now held almost 20 storytelling shows in Chicago in the last year and a half. And we just hosted our first ever professional storytelling competition on my birthday. Since I couldn't be with all of you in Ventura this year, I threw a birthday slam instead. And then the third really big seed for me was when Regina talked about working with like-minded individuals in a circle. And since then, over the last 6 months, I've been moderating men's forums online with a number of the guys that are in this call right now. And it's turned into be just this marvelously enriching experience where we grow and share, and we talk fears and emotions and lots of other things. And all of this work in general leads to the same point. And the same point is when we tell and listen to other people's stories, we create a platform where we realize that we are all the same. And we are living in a universe right now where humanity is craving the desire to see that we're all the same. And it's unfolding in this lifetime we're living right now, and how lucky are we. When we tell these stories, we realize that we're the same because we all have desires and dreams. And we all face challenges when we go on the journeys to satisfy those dreams. And on those journeys, we have awakenings, and those awakenings lead to contentment until we receive a new desire inside us, and then we go back out onto the journey. And for those of you who are familiar with it, and many of you are, it is a hero's journey for all of us, and we are the hero of our own life story. Joseph Campbell said it very well himself. The journey we're embarking on tonight is the culmination of 2 years of preparation for me, meeting an opportunity that I considered. So I'd like to officially welcome you to episode 2 of Stories from the Path with the amazing Rebecca Psigoda. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So I'm going to just introduce Rebecca before we start talking. Rebecca is a gifted speaker and a healer and a spiritual teacher. She's also a certified Infinite Possibilities trainer, and she has been teaching 2 different formats of IP over the years. Her first program, Empower Yourself Now and Create the Life You Desire, and her newest passion, Infinite Possibilities, I Believe in Me. And I Believe in Me is a custom design program to help children discover their own power. It's based on the foundation of Mike Dooley's Infinite Possibilities program, and it's repackaged for a younger audience. It inspires youths of all ages and backgrounds to believe that they are divine, special, unique, wonderful, loved, and connected. For the past year, Rebecca's been offering her program in conjunction with the Homeless Families Foundation through the Dowd Education Center in Columbus, Ohio. Rebecca is changing the lives of children who are most in need of believing that they have the power to write the story of their own lives as boldly and as brilliantly as they can possibly imagine. In addition, Rebecca has numerous other projects emerging even as we speak, and we'll hear much more about some of those things over the next hour. So please help me officially welcome to the conversation the divine Rebecca Psigoda. Welcome, Rebecca. You're live. Your audio's live.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I just want to say so many familiar faces. I'm getting a bunch of feedback.
Okay. I'm going to see if I've got anything on here and if anybody's unmuted. Yeah, one unmuted. There it is. We're good.
Okay. There you go. Good. Okay. So anyway, yeah, it's just really nice to see everybody.
Well, so Rebecca, you just returned from a little journey over the last weekend with your soul sisters and other like-minded individuals on the retreat, and you just finished your own 2-hour webinar earlier this evening. Tell us a little bit about your past couple of days here.
Well, first of all, it was a retreat of Tracy Farquhars, who's right there on the screen, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, and obviously a soul sister. It was fantastic. It was 22 people, and Tracy has moved into this place of passion and power and teaching that is so wonderful. Everyone had wonderful things to say. It was a 9-hour drive there and back, and there was never any quiet in the car with the 3 individuals who attended with me, including Amy, who's on the call. It was spectacular. We advanced some of our abilities. We rested, we relaxed, we shared, we connected, we danced. I'm not sure there's a whole lot we didn't do. It was really powerful. It was really wonderful. And the biggest thing I heard at the end was, when are you having your next one? Are we coming back next year? Can we do this again next year? So clearly it was a huge success for Tracy. And I'm just pleased as I can be that I was able to be there and attend with some friends from outside this community from Columbus, who all now want to go to Solopalooza. So that's the power of her story and her work reaching others just in my immediate vicinity. So that's the last couple of days.
And I know Christiane and I are looking forward to the opportunity to attend one of Tracy's retreats in the upcoming future. So I met Rebecca at that very first IP conference that I talked about earlier in the call in 2014, when she was presenting one of the sections for the demo. But that was certainly not your first conference, Rebecca. How many conferences have you attended with Mike and the gang?
9.
9. So you've had 9 conferences.
Yes.
So I want to go back to your first one here for a few minutes here.
Okay.
Where was your first conference?
Orlando, 2012.
Okay, so really
Tracy and Mary Jo Rakowski. So
all within the last 4 years, basically.
yes.
you told me that you wound up at that conference actually because you were seeking a Train the Trainer program based on another workshop that you had previously taken. Is that right?
Actually, it wasn't another workshop. I had read Diane Collins' book, Do You Quantum Think? And then I had an opportunity to meet Diane in Miami. And we sat down and had dinner, she and I and her husband. And I said, this is so great, but is there any way that you could wrap this up into some kind of training program? Because if you could, I would love to be one of your trainers. And her response was, well, we don't really do that. We're kind of corporate business coaches, but there are programs like that out there. And 2 weeks later, I received a note from the universe. It was completely random. And at the bottom, it said, come to my Train the Trainer. I didn't know who Mike Dooley was. I'd never heard of Infinite Possibilities. And I was on the phone immediately making that call and making that reservation because clearly the universe had handed me just what I just asked for in a slightly different form, and it's been doing it ever since.
Awesome. So many of you have been to that conference or those conferences before, but for those of you who haven't, there's a number of really powerful moments in that conference. One of my favorite exercises that we do at the Train the Trainer conference is we do an exercise where we write in our workbooks about what we think our lives might look like in the future. And if I remember specifically, we write down 3 main things that we want to visualize and think into our lives. You shared me the 3 things that you wrote down when we were talking one time. Can you share that with the rest of us?
Sure. They were career, financial, and relationship. So the career one was, although I was happy with what I was doing, I wanted more. And I wasn't exactly sure what that was, but I knew that it involved doing retreats for women specifically. The finance one was, I really wanted financial security at the moment. I didn't feel that I had that. And the relationship one, which is probably the most interesting, is I had been divorced from Mark since 2008. And I felt that I was ready to have a relationship again. So my wish was to have a relationship with someone that would be a serious relationship that could potentially move into a wedding.
Well, we're going to get back to that a little bit later and talk more about that.
I know we are.
So you also told me in one of our preparatory calls that you don't believe in New Year's resolutions, which many of us don't. But you said that in 2015 you wanted to start a new project. At the first Train the Trainer, you identified that you wanted to work with women specifically, but you also said something about wanting to work with the younger version of yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly what my thinking was. I knew walking into that training that what I really wanted was 2 things. I wanted to be good enough at it to work with other trainers, so to become a trainer of trainers. The other thing I wanted was to work with the younger version of myself, so work with the younger me. And at that point, just to be honest, I didn't mean childhood. I didn't mean that young. I had some other things in mind, and it doesn't really matter what they are, but this was not what I thought to be my target audience.
So it was not working with children like you are now, and I Believe in Me, that was your first thought. What was your first thought at that point? Did you have a thought at that point?
I did. It was domestic violence and those who had experienced some form of abuse, specifically sexual abuse.
So it wasn't homeless children that you were thinking of at that point in time.
No.
Tell us a little bit about how that transition happened. What opened up this portal for you?
So in the beginning of 2015, I reached out on Facebook and asked all of my friends who I could think of. I said, okay, I'm ready to do some nonprofit work now. And here are the specific audiences I'd like to work with. And I contacted the organizations around town that I thought would be very excited to have this program that I was willing to do as a volunteer. And I heard no, and then I heard no, and then I heard no. And I was kind of confused about that. I didn't want to argue with anyone because I realized that in this work, that's not what you do. If something isn't working out, it's because it's not supposed to. But I was confused. I felt that I had been grooming myself for this all along. This is where I thought I was going to go. And one day, out of the clear blue, one of my friends who works with Homeless Families Foundation said, so Rebecca, could you do this work with kids? And I kind of thought, kids? It's not really designed for kids. And she said, yeah, but could you do it? And I said, well, I guess so. Sure. I was thinking about, Jim Carrey in the movie, Yes, where he says, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. So that's what crossed my mind. And I just said, yes, I will. I then was asked if I wanted to come down and tour the place because I'd never been there. And so I said, sure. So I walked into the building, walked up about 6 stairs, and the first room that she showed me on the right was the library. So I walked in and I looked up, and there in the most prominent position on a shelf in the library was Mike Dooley's children's book, Dreams Come True. And I thought, well, isn't that nice? And my heart started to pound a little harder and my pulse started to race a little bit. And we walked out of the library and she showed me some of the rest of the building. And then we ended up in the cafeteria, which is where the 80 children were at the time. And so I walked through and I was looking at all these smiling, shiny faces. And of course, I was starting to tear up already. And we got to the far corner and I turned around and I looked at the back wall. And there was a giant mural from the cover of Mike Dooley's book. And the tears just came. I knew. And I'm fighting it right now because clearly that was a sign to me that I had been guided to this place. Those no's were not no's. They were, this isn't it. We have something in mind for you. And I couldn't have thought of a bigger, more clear sign than that mural on the wall of Mike's book. So I knew I was home. And that's exactly how I felt. I went, this is it. I'm home.
So many of us in the audience have these dreams of starting programs, and one of the things that gets in the way are sort of those financial barriers that we perceive in getting started. Tell us a little bit about how you created the opportunity to get this program off the ground at the Dowd Education Center.
Okay. Well, first of all, I volunteered. So I agreed to come and work with these kids as a volunteer. And a couple of things happened while I was doing that. First of all, I somehow knew that if I was going to do this, I would want to share it. So I should be writing it all down. What am I doing? How am I doing it? How am I transferring and repackaging Mike's foundational program so that it's more fun for kids? And as I did that, I did exactly what I just said. I wrote everything down. And oftentimes I didn't finish that until 11 o'clock the night before I was presenting it. I did keep track of everything I was doing. Then the other thought that I had, well, it took until the summer was over. The summer was over. The kids had such a major shift that the director asked me if I would come back and teach again in the fall, but 2 classes this time. So she wanted to, double up. And she said, by the way, there's no money in the budget for this. And I said, well, how about this? I have an idea. I said, what if I raise the money? I said, I think I can go out into the community and talk to a few people who would write those checks to the Homeless Families Foundation and create a pool of money there for the I Believe in Me program by sponsoring students, not the program, but the students. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, I sat down with the woman from Homeless Families Foundation and we kind of knocked out this donor package, this thing that I could present to someone. The check was then, or the amount through your credit card, whatever, was made out to the Homeless Families Foundation, targeted for my program. It was 100% tax deductible. So the person making the donation gets to write it off. Homeless Families Foundation and I agreed on an amount that they would keep from that. And the rest created a pool of money like a bank. I am an independent contractor. I charge per student. And so every time I have a class of students, I get paid from that money that I raised. And I raised enough for a year, or what I projected to be a year's worth of students in about 2 months, just by asking people that I knew if they would sponsor a student or students. So that's how that happened.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about getting ready for that first session then. So the wheels are turning, the excitement's there, you're getting ready to start working with the kids. You've written things down, you've created this program based on the teachings that Mike's created, Infinite Possibilities. Tell us about getting into that first session.
Well, I had only written the introduction. So again, I literally wrote it along the way. And part of that was because I needed them to show me what was going to work how much time they could sit and listen to new information, how much time they needed for activities, exercises, or some other distraction besides me talking. And so each time I taught a class, I was constantly making note of what's working, what isn't working, and making adjustments. So by the time it was done, it looked very different than if I would have written the whole thing up front. One of the things I'm kind of adamant about is it doesn't matter what I want to say, it matters what you want to hear. So when you and I were prepping for this webcast, for example, Jim, I shared that with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk about me and my life and whatever that's kind of irrelevant. I only want to share the information that I think will help you on your journey, because to me, that's all really your audience wants to hear. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So you walk in there on the first morning and you've got a handful of students, I think you said what, 10, 11, 12, 13?
I had 11.
Yeah.
11.
And obviously within that 11, there's some different energies and different comfort levels. Tell us about some of the kids.
Well, I had a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this. And a lot of just lack of trust. Who is this woman? What could she possibly know about us here? Mm-hmm. And, I observed that, and then I shared something that I rarely share. And I realized that probably for the first time, I realized why I was there. I forget as an adult, because my life is so great, that I was homeless. So I shared a brief story with them about, I just want you guys to understand something. I'm standing here today in front of you, and I have all these things I want to share with you, but I was once you. I was a little older. I was in my late teens, but I did experience living in a car, sharing that car with another girlfriend, because we were homeless for quite some time in Los Angeles. And I realized at that moment that when the universe put me there, it realized I forgot that. And so when I asked to work with the younger me, it put me exactly where I belonged, because that was a very difficult time. And probably one that I should be sharing with other young students to show them that it doesn't always have to look like this. Mike's idea was to reach those who need to be reached. They need to be reached. They need to be shown and told that it can be different, that it can look like this. And that's been my intention ever since, is to reach as many young people as possible, with the idea that it may look kind of rough right now, but it doesn't have to stay like this. And if you have tools to manage your own mind and be conscious and deliberate about the way you live, you never know. One day you might be standing in front of a room of students sharing your experiences and your knowledge and your teachings with them. And wouldn't that be fantastic? And yes, it is.
It would be fantastic. So as this thing's going, it's launching, things are sort of evolving. When does the seed kick in for you that says, I need to share this with other people. I need to train trainers, to go back to one of your,
Mm-hmm.
heart's desires?
Well, I knew as soon as I started doing it, because I knew nobody else was doing it. And I knew that there would be children all over the world that would need to be reached. But I didn't really take it that far in my mind. I knew that I needed to take this step. And I don't think it really, really hit me about sharing it with other trainers until I was finishing up my 2 fall classes. So now I had completed 3. And I just was observing the most astounding shift in these kids. And I thought, all right, but I'm just me working here at this one place. And what if other trainers could go out and do this? What if other cities could have this? So I what if'd. And that's when I began to think about it. And I also thought about how I created an opportunity to have an income from that. And I also thought that was a piece that needed to be heard by the other trainers, whether they were going to work with kids or not. That there are ways that we can get paid that maybe hadn't been expressed yet in any kind of mastermind class or teaching from the conferences or whatever. And I wanted to share that because I know so many really talented people in the IP community that would love to do more with their work, but there's a put bread and butter on the table element, which makes it difficult for them to imagine leaving their jobs. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, this could help anyone within the IP community. So I guess that's the answer. I just realized more kids need to be reached, more than just I can reach. More of the IPI trainers probably should be out doing whatever it is that they're passionate about and making an income. And so how do I get all of that out there? That's how that kind of came together. And again, I wasn't thinking of those hows along the way. Mike taught us well not to worry about that, just having the intention. So the intention was there for those things to happen.
So this working with kids then obviously starts to become something that you engross yourself in, and then the ideas start to come, and
yes.
Boy, do you have some ideas that are in the works. Tell us what you can about some of the things that are in the works that will be a complement to this program.
Okay. Debbie Pearson is on this call right now. Debbie Pearson was in my small group in San Antonio. And one of the ideas I had in my mind was a coloring book. The kids in my class love to color. It actually keeps them very calm and focused. And so unlike some teachers who want you to pay attention and look directly at them and whatever, I let them draw, doodle, color, whatever, and then they're actually more focused and more willing to stay in that seat and listen to what you have to share. So I decided that I wanted to do a coloring book, and as soon as I decided I wanted to do it, it was written. It was as if it dropped into my head, and it was, full-blown, the whole thing. Each page represents part of a session in I Believe in Me, Infinite Possibilities, I Believe in Me. So I thought, okay, well, now I have this, but I need some images. And I looked at Debbie Pearson's page, and she had this beautiful black and white image up, and I knew she was the person. So I said, would you be interested in doing the illustrations? And she said, yes. So I reached out to Debbie. She created all the illustrations for the Infinite Possibilities, I Believe in Me coloring book, which is for youth. And again, each of the stanzas represents part of a session in IP. So it's basically taking you through it like Dr. Seuss in a, rhyming way, but it displays all the principles, it covers all the key points. Then we decided that it should probably also be a permanent book, and tried to figure out how to add the color once it was finished. And ultimately what ended up happening is we took those images to the Homeless Families Foundation, gave them to my kids. All 80 kids colored the images in. They put them up on the wall. They voted for their favorites. And that is now the book that will be the companion with the coloring book that is co-authored with Mike and will be presented to Hay House. So that's one. And again, it's the whole I Believe in Me program, mainly though for a 5 to 8 year old audience, which is part of what else is happening. There's also a character book that has been created with characters that represent each of the sessions of Infinite Possibilities. Only I switched it up so that all that they have is a saying that represents what Infinite Possibilities is about in that session. For example, the hero of happiness, which is modeled after Jeffrey Hutchinson, is a African-American looking superhero with dreads. And his saying is, what you think about, you bring about. So then there's Bella Believes, and Bella is modeled after Christiana, actually. And she's a redhead, and she wears a dress of leaves, and she represents beliefs. So there are 7 characters. The dolls are arriving tomorrow that are prototyped that represent all of them. Nancy Morrison created those prototypes. I just designed them and had other people doing the drawings and the prototypes and that sort of thing. So that character book also walks you through, but it walks you through in a way that, what if you're being bullied at school? What if you're having a self-image issue? And so each of the characters helps the students throughout the book in a school where all students have superpowers to empower themselves to work through their issues. That's the other book that is sitting with Tut right now waiting to go to Hay House. So there's the 3 children's books. The dolls, as I mentioned, should be arriving tomorrow. I don't know where they're going to end up because these are the prototypes. They're probably not something they're at a price point that can be recreated for other trainers. So that's happening. Jeff Hutchison is creating little video vignettes to insert into each session of the program that introduces the characters and what they do and how that's going about. That's some of the things that I've been working on. I have an advanced program I'm building right now because the students I currently have are repeaters. They're kids that begged all year to come back, but I couldn't give them the same thing, so this is new information. So that's being built. Let's see. That is it. Is that
that's all? That's all, Rebecca. And all of this has happened in, like, those projects have all happened in the last 6 months, maybe less than that, right?
That's correct.
There's actually an interesting story behind the spark, if you will, for the dolls. I think,
yes.
You know, as with everything, like, you know, there's a spark. And then many of you understand this idea of just sort of channeling all this information. And so my wife is currently with Wendy Isaac in Dahlonega working on a project. About 4 months ago, Christiana was in Bend with Wendy, and she posted a photo that sort of gave you an idea. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So Team San Antonio has had a thread running since San Antonio where we keep in touch. At first it was a lot, and then it kind of filtered off a little bit. But Christiana posted a picture on there of her with this little, it's called an ugly doll.
Yep.
And I looked at the doll and I went, its name was
Whippy.
Whippy with a
W, yep.
Whippy. And I went, well, Whippy should be an Ippy. And then I thought, oh my gosh, Ippy dolls. And from there, it just, again, the images started to land in my head. And you're right, it was exactly like a spark. It was as if I had kindling sitting there and the spark landed and the fire took off. The images were all in my head within days of what Hero of Happiness would look like, what Bella would look like, what Emotion would look like, what Faith would look like, who's modeled somewhat after our dear girl, Tracy Farquhar. So these dolls showed up, and it was sparked from looking at Christiana in a picture holding an ugly doll named Yippee like this. It just landed.
I love it.
That's how I refer to it.
It's amazing how this team that is a part of Infinite Possibilities, and even those of you who aren't, you're a part of this family by being involved in things like this, just spawns a collective energy to create and to heal. It's so beautiful. I want to go back a little further in your life now, though, because we talked about in this call the idea that everything happens for a reason, and we're gonna come back to that later at the end of the call and talk about that more. But obviously, what's happened in your life, and you referenced the fact that you spent some time homeless, and that prepared you for the work you're doing now. But we're gonna go back to your early years for a few minutes, and you told me that you grew up in a fairly abusive home.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your background as a young child.
Okay. My mother passed away when I was 18 months old, and my father was an alcoholic left with 4 children and no idea how he was going to manage that. So I think mainly he managed it by drinking and just trying to hide from what had happened. Also the circumstances behind my mother's illness and ultimate death. She was sick, and he had let go of our insurance to buy this small ranch in Southern California. And it was only after that they found out she was sick. So there was no insurance. It's just the kind of thing that builds into a chaotic situation. And I believe that after she passed, he felt tremendous, terrible guilt, in addition to just an inability to manage what he was going to do with 4 children. He remarried a couple of years later, a woman who, for circumstances that don't matter, really did not want to have anything to do with us. So it didn't take very long before she had both of my older sisters, there were 4 of us at the time, I was the youngest, sent off to live in foster care. In retrospect, I always thought it was probably the best thing to happen because my father would just beat them. When he was drinking, when he was angry, when he'd had enough, he was a hitter. I was fortunate. I didn't have any of that happen in my personal world, but I learned at a very young age what would trigger that, so I didn't do it, which included misbehave, speak. I was incredibly quiet, extremely withdrawn, very reserved. I did the very best I could at school at all times because that was something that he valued. And so that's who I was. I hid in my closet a lot. And that's where I spent a good portion of my childhood, being very small, very quiet, and just staying out of the way. So I learned that if you are not seen and if you are not heard, then you are not hurt. And I spent most of my life being that person.
So that silence, you said to me at once when we were talking, that is where you learned to be silent. That silence carried deep into your life then, did it not?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. You just always watch when you live in an environment like that. So again, I now know the value of that. I'm highly sensitive and highly intuitive, and I'm extremely aware. Typically, like when I was in college, I could walk into a room and decide very quickly where to sit because I knew who I should sit near because they were a studier, and I knew who to avoid because they were a partier, and that wasn't going to work. So, again, I look at all of these things now as gifts. These are things that created who I am and the sensitivity that I have and the compassion that I have. So I'm sorry, did I answer the question?
Absolutely. So you were 16 and you were asked to leave the house and you wound up living in I think you said a 1-bedroom apartment with 7 other girls for a year or so?
Yeah, that actually took a while. At first I moved out, I moved in with, a family of a girlfriend. They said, please, come be with us. So I was, but I really didn't feel like I deserved to live there. It was the kind of family I only got to witness occasionally if I visited it. It was certainly nothing like my home. Mom baked cookies on Friday and everybody sat down and had dinner and you could talk at the table. I wasn't raised in a house where you were allowed to talk at the table. And so it was just very different. And I was very uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I deserved to be there. So I was off on my own. I had a full-time job in an apartment at 16.
So you're a high school student working a full-time job and going to high school.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then I started college and I just really had a hard time. I was working till 1 a.m, sleeping through my afternoon classes. So I dropped out and I moved to Southern California to be with my sisters. I hadn't really spent time with them since they were put in foster care so many years before, and ended up moving in with one for a while. But I had some friends up in LA and it was really cool up there and I go visit sometimes and finally moved up there. And yeah, there were 7 of us living in a 1-bedroom, sharing ramen noodles.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You told me that, like 7 girls sharing ramen in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So that lasted for about a year, maybe?
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't really reiterate the time frame, right. But yes, not very long. Yeah. And then we got kicked out, probably because there were only supposed to be 2 people living in it. And so one of the girls and I, another girl who had come from Wisconsin as I had, hung out in her car and, slept in parking lots and cleaned up at gas stations. And that's what we did for a while.
So this is the period in your life that you referenced earlier where you wound up living homeless in a car with a friend of yours. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what your life looked like back then. Where were you at emotionally? What were your thoughts? Where was your hope at? What were you thinking might happen with your life?
Well, the 2 most common limiting beliefs are, I'm not good enough and I don't have enough. So let's just start there. Mm-hmm. That's how I felt. I didn't feel a lot of hope. I didn't feel much joy. I was scared, very scared. There was really no place. My girlfriend had a mom who would send us like a couple $100 here and there, and we would just make that work. But I kept trying. I tried to get waitress jobs. It's in LA. You don't have an education. I had no desire to be an actress, singer, or anything like that. Like many of the girls, I just wanted a good waitress job, and I couldn't get it. I didn't feel a lot of hope. So again, it's what helps me now see where these kids are at and the road that they could potentially be on if they follow in the footsteps of their, what's been shown to them.
So fast forward a little bit, you wind up back in Wisconsin working at a cable company.
Yes.
So this is around 1984. Tell us a little bit about your job in Wisconsin at the cable company.
I was very fortunate. I worked in engineering, and I'll just admit it. I got the job because the president of the company, I was bartending at the time. The president of the company would come in and sit at my bar, and he would talk to me every night. And finally he said, "You should really come in and work for me." I thought, really? Me? And so I took him up on his offer and went and got a job with, a group of people that just kind of went out and looked at poles, and, that's the electric line and that's the telephone line, and it was setting up for putting cable television into town. So they taught me what to do and how to do it, and I did it. The next thing you know, I was drawing maps, and the next thing you know, I got a promotion, and then I got another one, and then I got another one. And so I was working in engineering, kind of helping create the build of cable television in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But I guess I know where you're going next.
Yeah, so something pretty important happened when you wound up back in Wisconsin working for the cable company.
Yeah, there was this great butt that used to walk by my office all the time.
And was that butt attached to somebody?
Yeah, that very cute boy that's upstairs right now, probably listening to everything I'm saying and rolling his eyes. So Mark was in the sales and marketing department. And again, my office was situated so that my desk was next to a window, but it was the window of a hallway. So he'd walk by that hall and I'd just be like, "That's a great butt." And I'm sorry, but that's what I was thinking. And Mark was a really nice guy. He was kind of known as the man on campus. Mark was the guy at the office that said, "Hey, new dress, looks great. I love the new hair. Those new shoes, those look awesome." So he was always very kind and very complimentary and very shy.
And you coaxed him out of that shyness one day when you asked him.
Did. A group was going out after work for, happy hour on a Friday, and I invited him to come with us. So I asked him out. Me, the quiet, never speaks up girl.
And so from the time you asked him to go to drinks with the whole office until the time you wound up married was?
Okay, let me do the math. A year and a half altogether, maybe.
So pretty quick. So things moved pretty quickly when you guys met.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
You have two sons that are your absolute prides and joys. I know that from talking to you. Tell us a teeny bit about your two sons.
Well, their names are Jared and Jordan. Jared is 30 and Jordan is 27. They are both, I am proud to say, very successful entrepreneurs. They do not live here, that I'm sad to say, so we don't get to see them very often. Jordan is in Colorado in the medical marijuana business, and I think he is part owner of about 8 different companies right now. Jared is in Shenzhen, China, and has a company that he started in his early 20s, took it public last year. It's a gaming company. And as of today, just launched his very own company, which is a new social platform, social networking platform called LiveStar. And LiveStar is live video feed where you're the star. So let's say, for example, Tracy wanted to do her Monday morning tarot card reading on LiveStar. She would tell people about it, show up at a particular time, run it live, and the people who show up can gift her. And as they gift her, they move up to, like the top of the list of people to ask her questions, that sort of thing. So it's monetized. So he's taken his gaming work and this live streaming idea and turned it into the beginnings of what he hopes, Mark Zuckerberg, to become the next Mark Zuckerberg and have that thing that everyone enjoys and takes part in, makes money at, and maybe creates another public company. I don't know.
Yeah, and everything you read about where we're going in social media is that live video is everything going
Yes.
forward. So how wonderful that many of us are going to be able to enjoy Jared's efforts probably very, very directly.
Yes.
So you and Mark spent many years together,
We did.
but it has not been continuous. Like many of us, relationships and external circumstances cause people to grow apart at times. And you two did grow apart, and about 5 years ago, I think, or maybe was it 10 years ago, you guys separated, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And you lived completely separate lives for some period of time, yes?
Yes, we did.
Tell us a little bit about your life during that period, those 5 years that you guys were apart.
You know, I could act like it was terrible, but it wasn't. I think for the first time, that space gave me an opportunity to figure out who I was and to find my voice. I really didn't know. I had spent my whole life making sure everybody around me was happy. And what did that mean? What do you need? What do you need? What can I do for you? And I hadn't really been alone since my early 20s. And even then, I always had a roommate. So I lived completely by myself. And I began to really think about what mattered to me and who would I be if I didn't have to answer to anyone. And so that's what I did. I enjoyed it for the most part. I learned a lot. That's when I came to my first Train the Trainer. That's when I began to really read the Diane Collins of the world and read the Mike Dooleys of the world and start to be more conscious and deliberate within myself about what I wanted. So I would say that really that's what it was. But I did reach a point where I wanted to be in a relationship again. As I said, when I attended the first Train the Trainer, that was one of my 3 dreams, was to have that kind of relationship again.
So that first Train the Trainer, as you said, you wrote down those 3 dreams, and they all happened within 6 months.
Yes, they did.
You did find the loving relationship you were looking for within 6 months, and you met him at a concert, I believe. Is that correct? So tell us a little bit about that day when you went to that concert in 2012.
So I'm standing in the bathroom washing my hands, and one of my girlfriends walks over and says, Mark's out there. And I said, Mark?
And you hadn't seen each other for 5 years at that point, right?
Oh, no, we saw each other a few times. with the children and that sort of thing. But it was just a different experience. She said, Mark's out there. And I remember thinking, because, I had seen him before I had attended the Train the Trainer. So I wasn't thinking along those same lines anymore. So I just froze, and it was like so many other things that feel like a spark happened, a knowing happened. I stood, and I'll never forget, I stood with my hands under the water. My pulse was racing. My heart was pounding. And I just stood there with my hands under the water for the longest time. And I stopped, and I kind of shook my hands, and I turned, and I walked out the door. And in 1,000 people, I saw him immediately. And it was as if the sunflower field was parting, the Red Sea was parting. It was as if people just stepped aside, and I walked that path, and I was crying. I was just like tears streaming down my cheeks. And he saw me when I was, I don't know, maybe 20 feet away. He looked up and saw me, and he was talking to a guy friend, and they were laughing. And he stopped, and he looked at me, and he could see I was already falling apart. And he opened his arms, and I walked in, and he put them around me, and I just lost it. I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And that's when it began to unfold again. And, I knew I'd always loved him. It was just those years in between had to happen for all kinds of reasons. But I was 100% in love with him again at that moment. And, I can't tell you exactly how something like that happens, because sometimes it just does. And you know it, and I knew it.
So you were dating for a number of years as ex-husband and ex-wife, but there's been a shift in that recently.
Yes.
Tell us about the shift.
On Mother's Day, we went to a lovely restaurant, sat on a patio, and the weather was beautiful. And he presented me with a card. And on the top of the card, it said, "To the woman I'd marry all over again." And once again, I'm a crier, so I started crying, and I knew what was happening. And I opened the card, and it was lots of lovely stuff that I won't share with you. But it ended with, "What do you think? Will you marry me again?" And yes, I said yes. I didn't even say, "Gee, I need to think about it." I said, "Of course, absolutely, yes." So this is my old engagement ring from 1985. This is the new ring that he gave me for Mother's Day. And so, yes, we do not have a date. It probably will be before the end of the year, but yes, I am marrying the man I love again. And that should be this year sometime. On a beach somewhere with, hopefully our children. That's it. I'm pretty excited about that.
So throughout the call, you've referenced a number of things that have happened in your life, and not everything that happens we prefer. But I love the fact that, like many people that are in this community that we're with mostly tonight, we all recognize that those contrasts and challenges are necessary. And I heard you say a number of times tonight that I needed that time homeless, that time away from Mark. You said to me when we were talking a couple of weeks ago that there is no bad, just different chapters in each individual journey, in your own hero's journey. Tell us in this last question, what are the most important things you've learned about yourself?
Wow. One of the most important things is that I am powerful and I get to choose what I think and believe and say and do. And free will is, one of our greatest gifts. So as Mike would say, choose wisely. Choose what you think about. Choose who you surround yourself with. If the beliefs you have don't work for you, change them. You can do that. So yeah, I've come to learn while creating this program for the kids especially, just how powerful we really are and how much we get in our own way. I've also learned that anything and everything that's happened up till now was supposed to happen so that I could be right here, right now, doing exactly what I'm doing. Could I have the same heart if I hadn't been through those things? Would I have the same compassion for the people that I'm working with without having been through those things? It's all part of the whole. One of the exercises I do with the kids is a community puzzle. I take pictures of them throughout the sessions, and I put them on the various pieces, and I write out something on the front, like this last one was, "I believe in me." And so they each get a few pieces of the puzzle, and together they assemble it. On the back of the puzzle pieces, they write things like, "My favorite thing about my family, my favorite thing about my community, my favorite thing about me." So it's showing them that these things are all connected, all of it, and they're a part of it. So when they put their picture in, you ask them, what would that look like if your picture wasn't in there? And everything that makes us who we are, makes us the individual that we are, makes us that corner piece or that side piece or that piece in the middle. So we're all a part of the one, and everything that we go through is a part of our one and who we are. But we have to choose. If we don't, that's okay, that's a choice, but we can choose what we want, and we can choose those things that are best for us and best for the people around us. And the next thing you know, life's pretty freaking bright and shiny if you choose well.
It
so
is.
I'm sure there are other things, if we had more time, I would share with you what I learned in the 2 sessions where I stopped breathing after surgeries and left my body. But let's just wrap that up with all of this is a gift. It's a gift that we chose. And when we look at it that way, it really is wonderful. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. One of the things that I would also add is I no longer think of bad emotions. they're all good because they're part of what makes us human. Clearly, we know in the IPI community, we can make choices about how long we want to hold on to them. But I know that having a bad emotion, if that's what you want to call it, or negative emotion, is a gift as well. So all of it is good, every bit of it, all of it. With the right perception, the right perspective, and all of that I pretty much learned from Infinite Possibilities. So, you know, everything in life made sense once I took the program, once I became a trainer, once I started to share it with others. Everything suddenly makes sense. And what a gift.
What a gift indeed. And what a gift you are, Rebecca. Let's give it up for the wonderful, divine, and amazing Rebecca Psigoda. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you, and I know everybody in the audience is grateful to you. So we're going to take a few minutes here, and by just waving your hand if you're on the video, I'm going to give you an opportunity to either ask a question or make a comment or just express your gratitude to Rebecca in any way you like. Who wants to? Anybody have there anything they want to throw out there? Just wave at me if you've got something. See, this is the way it always goes with these. You always throw it out for questions. Oh, look at Tom's going to break the seal. I love you, Tom. What do you got, buddy?
I love you too, Jim, and I love you, Rebecca, and was so blessed to be able to spend most of a week in her home with her and Mark, and it was to see you now, knowing your home and knowing where you are, it feels very connected, and I love listening to your stories tonight. I don't have any questions, just congratulations on being you and the gifts that you're sharing.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. Anybody else have anything they want to say to Rebecca or a question they want to ask to Rebecca? All right, so that's going to lead us to just a few announcements as we wrap up this second episode of Stories from the Path. And one of the announcements involves our friend up here in the upper corner here. Wave at us, Mark. How you doing, buddy? So Mark, as many of you know, is an Infinite Possibilities trainer, and he has many gifts as well. And one of the gifts that he has is speaking to the sense of loss and grief based on some of the stories that he's had in his life and some of the things he's done with it. So I'm really excited to say that on August 10th, Mark and I are launching a new workshop called Discovering Acceptance and Finding Peace. And while it is already sold out, we are grateful to say, we will be planning future workshops. So Mark is going to share some of the tools that he has for discovering how to find acceptance in your life. And that acceptance from loss doesn't just relate to death. It can relate to divorce, as many of us have been through, or any other departures within our life. So Mark, do you have anything you want to say to the group here at all?
No, I look forward to sharing. I'm like in awe over Rebecca's story. I'm thinking, geez, she's got a great story.
Yeah. Well, the one thing we find out when we do stuff like this is that we all have great stories. And speaking about great stories, the next episode of Stories from the Path will be episode number 3. It will be on Monday, August 22nd. And I'm very excited to announce that our featured guest for that call will be the very Jeffrey Hutcherson that Rebecca has spoken about. And Jeffrey's going to talk about the 2 books that he's written, Transformational Thoughts and Hot Chocolate Happiness, and the 3rd book that he's working on. He's also going to talk about some very specific issues that we're facing in our world right now and the All Lives Matter issues. And I'm super excited to listen to Jeffrey's amazing takes on how we can all live a life of happiness simply by shifting in the moment. And I've worked with him in some men's groups, and I can't wait to share him in this open forum. So that's a wrap for tonight, folks. I cannot thank you enough. You are all so blessed for joining us, and I'm so grateful for the support. I'm grateful to you, Rebecca. I love you so much for your time, and I love you for being you and the beautiful light that you are. Look for the next broadcast in a month, and find us on Facebook. And until then, have an amazing night. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.